Hey guys, Steph here. So in this vlog, I'm going to talk about what Bruce Lee could teach coders. Now, just in case you don't know who Bruce Lee is. Now, for you youngins out there, Bruce Lee was a movie star from the, I guess the late 60s, early 70s. But his lasting legacy, you may not know, is for his martial arts point of view, his martial arts system. He has something called Jeet Kune Do. Now, this is going to all relate to coding very soon. So Jeet Kune Do is Bruce Lee's martial arts style, but it was a more advanced style than anything seen before in terms of how he thought about things. And he was one of these guys I looked up to as a kid. And when I started to do martial arts, well, I discovered him when I was 14. I started doing martial arts when I was 10. But nonetheless, this is a quote: "Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is specifically your own." Now, let me say it again. Absorb what is useful, discard what is useless, and add what is specifically your own. Now, this is a principle, I don't think he got it out of nowhere. He studied philosophy and so on, and he applied his philosophy training, learning from, I think he was in Seattle, to martial arts. But this applies to anything in life, really. Now, how does this relate to code? You got to remember, martial arts systems, whether it be karates, kung fu's, boxing, wrestling, judo, you name it, they're all technologies of combat. They're all there to teach you more or less how to fight. And, some styles are much more realistic and some are totally unrealistic. Nonetheless, they are technologies, and they can be very complex, and it could take years and years to even understand some of the more profound, some of the more concepts, some of the more complex concepts in the styles. And I did martial arts for 30 years or so, and I was really serious into it. And at one point when I was younger, I was going to become a pro fighter, but because of illness, sickness, I decided to stop. I did some JKD, Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's art. And I'm not going to get into martial arts talk here, but what I want to express is, again, that basic philosophy of absorb what is useful, discard what isn't, and do your own thing. And this comes to coding as well. The Jeet Kune Do philosophy was try out all kinds of different styles. Try some boxing, do some fencing, do some taekwondo, do some judo, do some Wing Chun, do some Kongar, so on and so forth. Do all these different styles and see what you can find that's good in each of them. Now, before I discovered JKD and Bruce Lee, I sort of had that inclination of I am an eclectic by nature. So I did judo, then I did karate, then I did taekwondo. Why? Because I said to myself, well, if I want to learn how to kick, the best kicking style I knew at the time was taekwondo. So I'm going to go do some kicking with the taekwondo guys because they're best at kicking. And if I want to learn how to grapple, you grapple, you do judo, and so on and so forth. And that's basically the JKD philosophy, is don't get caught up in the system. Don't say, I'm a judo guy and everything else sucks. I'm a karate guy and everything else sucks. I'm a boxer and everything else sucks. That's a wrong-headed approach, because no particular system has all the answers. No particular coding language, programming language has all the answers. No particular framework has all the answers. Everything is very circumstantial. So in fighting, I've been in the ring, if I've been in the ring 100 times, I've been in 1,000 times. I used to be a bouncer in a nightclub, and I can tell you from experience, hard-earned experience, that circumstances dictate which technology, which fighting style, if you will, that you're going to implement given the circumstance. Now, when you get to a high level in martial arts and fighting, there's no style. There literally is no style, because what you learn is that the common thing that we all have to deal with is our physical bodies. We all have, our arms, legs, and our psychological selves, our mental selves. And the principles, whether it be taekwondo, Thai boxing, boxing, judo, wrestling, are all the same. And so any movement in martial art, this, for instance, this could be a parry, it could be a beginning of a grappling move, it could be you drinking some tea or beer. And same thing with coding, whether you're programming PHP or C# or Java or Swift, the constructs of the language, the basics of the language are pretty much the same. And what separates good coders from bad coders is a clear understanding of the basics. So that's the key. The key to martial arts and the key to coding is figuring out what the key basics are. Because once you master the key basics, all the other stuff that looks kind of flowery and complex, whether it be in martial arts or whether it be in coding, are pretty much the same. I've said this in many other videos in the past. The complex stuff is just basic concepts or basic techniques layered on top of each other. That's all. Again, that's why I concentrate on the basics. So what Bruce Lee could teach you is that whole idea of absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, and come up with your own stuff. Do what is specifically your own. Because the way your mind thinks in terms of coding is going to be different from the way I think. So you may look at a particular coding problem, a particular task that you need to solve using software, and you may look at it from a slightly different point of view. And sometimes points of view are right and wrong. Sometimes it's a question of taste and how you sort of view things. So not, all roads lead to Rome and all the other cliches I can come up with. Don't get caught up in the language or the framework. It doesn't matter. So when I comment on, like I say, I wouldn't learn Ruby on Rails today. I would look at other things for blah, 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 blah reasons. And then people get all excited. Much in the same way, in martial arts, you would have like Jiu-Jitsu school, Jiu-Jitsu style or school number 1 would have a beef against Jiu-Jitsu guys number 2 because they have a slightly different opinion about how Jiu-Jitsu should be performed. Or you have karate versus kung fu, or boxing versus kickboxing, or you get the idea. It's all kind of silly because when it comes to martial arts, the same 5 or 6 basic things differentiates the good fighters from the bad fighters. Because what happened for me in martial arts, I discovered that you can get great fighters who do judo, you can get great fighters who are boxers, you can get great fighters who are taekwondo guys, you can get great fighters who are jeet kune do guys. They're great fighters in many different styles, and many times in terms of certain like technique and execution, how you punch, how you kick, should you do this, they contradict each other a lot of times. And I realized many years ago, I said, if they're always contradicting each other, not always, but when they do contradict each other, but they can still produce good fighters, that tells you that the techniques that they say is so important are not important, right? Because they're both able to still produce good fighters with techniques that are opposed to each other. So that's an interesting thing. You see that in programming as well. Right now, on a very low level, you can see strangely enough, it surprises me, there's this rise of procedural code is good, functional coding is better than object-oriented is crap. But at the end of the day, you can still see good apps produced in each of these different styles, or more obviously, PHP sucks and Ruby's the best, or Java's the best and C Sharp's garbage or whatever. But they all produce good apps. And that tells you, since all these languages can produce good apps, that tells you that what produces a good app is not the language. It's the programmer, and the programmer who understands how to write good code regardless of the language. Final point. That's why I would always hire a guy who's a highly experienced JavaScript coder to do some Python work, rather than hiring an intermediate or beginner Python guy to do Python work. Why? Because it's much more difficult to become an advanced coder than it is to be a beginner Python coder or intermediate Python coder. Those advanced skill sets, those advanced understanding, that experience and ability to write code translates all coding. It translates all languages rather. So there you go. So that's the one of my influences in life as a child was Bruce Lee. And, I have to admit, I first watched him because he was pretty cool. But I don't know, you can look up some Bruce Lee videos. It looks kind of silly now. This stuff was done in the 60s and I guess the early 70s. He died, I think it was 72 or something, or 71. Young guy. So that's about it. I hope you find this video useful.